So welcome once again. Sorry about that. We're in Mishkanot Shananim. We happen to be. Oh, thank you. We're guests here in Mishkanot Shananim. Every week I try to mention Sir Moshe Montefiore and Sir Naim Dangur, who are our most significant sponsors of the Moraini program. And one of the legacies they left, one of the things that's very important to them is that we have Shiurim here in Mishkan Shananim. We bring some Torah to Mishkan Shananim to have some Torah happening here as well. So that's why we come here every once in a while. Their honor, their respect, people who contribute a lot to the Torah world in general and to us specifically. So we thank them for that. And here we are. So let's continue unit number 2 while we can. Upstairs, there's some kind of wedding or something upstairs, so we were moved around a bit, but I think now it's okay, right? I'm asking the Zoom people. You're managing to hear properly now, despite the noise that I can hear outside. Rabbi Yoel, thank you for the thumbs up. Great. So let's continue the topic of Tosefet Shviit. We've been trying to analyze. We analyzed from a few directions. Let's have a very, very, very quick recap of the questions we've dealt with. I'm going back to the beginning for a moment, right? We, generally speaking, we had the Machloket, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael about what is the source of Tosefet Shabbat and Shviit. We recognized what seems to be a difference between B'charish v'Katzir Tishbot. Is one kind of limud that seems to refer to the preparation to Shemitah and what happens after, as opposed to B'Tisha B'Chodesh B'Erev, which means that Yom Kippur starts a bit before the 10th of Tishrei. We saw some indications also on Shemitah there is such a concept, right? Tosefot say, why are you looking at Tosefet Shviit? Why should you look at Tosefet Shviit? Rashi says, no, it's a Drabanan Malkot. You don't look at Tosefet Shviit because it's all Drabana. It's the Malkot. Sorry, are midrabanan midoraita. It's just a Tosefet. It's a Isur Aseh. Tosefot saying no. It just means Shemitah started a bit before Shemitah, so you get Malkot. Now, that's one aspect. Another aspect we saw last time, Beit Shammai, how long before the Shemitah we analyzed at length. When you say Shavuot, you're not allowed to do the Charisha from Shavuot, or a bit before Shavuot, a bit after Shavuot. What does that imply? Does that imply that there's a specific time limit or not? We've analyzed this from several directions. I want to try to get to some kind of closure. Last time, Dr. Borolowitz asked, who's here with me, thank you, asked, everything that's Asur on Shemitah also Asur in Tosefet Shviit, right? Rabbeinu Tam, sorry if I'm jumping around the pages, I just want to give more of an overview kind of look. Rabbeinu Tam, it's on page 6, right? Yeah. Rabbeinu Tam on page 6 says that there's no Tosefet Shviit as it applies to Neti'ah, which implies that there's a difference between the Isurim that you have on the prohibitions that you have during Shemitah and the prohibitions you have in Tosefet Shviit before Shemitah. So they're distinctly different, right? As opposed to the Rash says, what do you mean? But anything that's also on Shemitah should be also to Tosefet Shviit, of course, right? It seems very obvious to him, which seems once again to imply maybe that Shemitah simply starts a bit before the 7th year. And what goes into effect then? Everything. Of course, everything. That seems to be the implication, right? Of course, everything applies earlier because why not? To just Shemitah started early, so why should it not apply? Let's go on to the Gemara. We had a quick look at this Gemara last time. Gemara on page 7. Let's have a look at the Gemara Moed Katan Daf Gimel. We started the unit with the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Tet. The Gemara Rosh Hashanah Daf Tet asks more broadly, how do we know Tosefet at all? In general. Here the Gemara goes more specifically into the question of Tosefet Shviit. We're going to go deeper into the analysis and comparison between the Gemara in Moed Katan and the parallel Yerushalmi in the next unit number 3. But first, let's see the main points that come out of this unit, out of this Gemara over here. The Gemara in Daf Gimel Amud Bet says, "Halacha l'Moshe miSinai hi damar Aviasi, mar b'Yochanan mishum Rabbi Nechunya ish bikat Beit Churtan." Esel Netiot Arava v'Nisuch HaMayim Malacha Moshe Misinai. What do Esel Netiot Arava and Nisuch HaMayim all have in common? That they're all Malacha Moshe Misinai. What else? That they're all halachot that apply to in Beit HaMikdash specifically. Right? That start from the end. Nisuch HaMayim, we're referring to the Nisuch HaMayim that was done next to the Mizbech during Sukkot. Next to the Mizbech, the Mikdash. Arava, we're talking about holding the Aravot around the Mizbech specifically, not the Aravot beating we do on Hoshana Rabbah, but the one specifically in the Mikdash. Esser Netiot, what's the relationship between Esser Netiot and the Beit HaMikdash? That we see in the next part of the Gemara. The Gemara says, at the end over here, I'm skipping to the last paragraph in the Gemara for a moment. Amar Ravashi, Rabban Gamliel uveit dino savri lekarabi Shmuel de'amar hilchet hagmirei la. Gmirei hilcheta bezman shebeit HaMikdash kayam. Dumi l'nisuch hamayim v'bezman shebeit HaMikdash kayam lo, which tells us that as long as there's Beit HaMikdash, you need to keep Tosefet Shviit. If there's no Beit HaMikdash, you don't need to keep Tosefet Shviit. That seems to be Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. Rabbi Akiva seems to disagree. Rabbi Akiva says, B'charish v'katzer tishbot, that seems to be Exeris HaKatuv, that there is Tosefet Shviit regardless. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Esel Netiot I'm saying as if it's an obvious din. I apologize. Esel Netiot has the following. If you have 10 Netiot within a certain space, you're allowed to plow them during Tosefet Shviit. You're allowed to plow the land that's around, that between these Netiot, between the young saplings that need the charisha for the water, right? So despite saying b'charish v'katzer tishbot, you're not allowed to plow during Shemitah, you are allowed to plow to allow a certain number of Netiot because that's a big hefset. But it only applies to Tosefet Shviit. So the way the Halacha Moshe Misinai works is as follows. You're allowed to plow before Shviit if it's Esel Netiot. If it's not Esel Netiot, you're not allowed. Which implies that there is a time before Shviit that you normally would not be allowed to. Right? In other words, the Halacha Moshe Misinai tells you this is a case in which you could make out. Say, wait, if this is a way in which you can, if this is a situation in which you could make out, it implies that generally you'd have to machmir. Right? That's the way this works. So that's where Rabbi Shmuel knows Tosefet Shviit from. The Akiva learns from Charish v'Katzer Tishbot, B'Charish Rashut Av Katzir Rashut. Sorry, V'Katzer Tishbot, Charish, which prepares for Shviit, and Katzir ends at the end of Shviit. Have a look at the Rambam. עבודת הארץ בשנה השישית, 30 יום סמוך לשביעית, אסורה הלכה למשה מסיני, מפני שהוא מתקנה לשביעית. בדבר זה, בזמן שבית המקדש קיים, הוא שנעשה מפי השמועה, גזרו חכמים שלא יהיו חורשים שדה אילן ערב שביעית, בזמן המקדש של עד העצרת, שדה לבן עד הפסח, בזמן של מקדש מותרים בעבודת הארץ, עד ראש השנה, כדין תורה. I read that quickly because this is things we've already learned. In other words, the Beit Hillel Beit Shammai argument about till Shavuot, till a bit before Shavuot, till a bit after, that's all Drabanan. Right, Sde Levant and Pesach, Drabana. Everything is Drabana. Midoraita, there's no Tosefet Shviit at all today. When there's Tosefet Shviit starts when? Only Rosh Chodesh Elul. So the way it works is like this. Tosefet Shviit Doraita starts 30 days before from Rosh Chodesh Elul. And then Chazal add another level, another layer, which is doing any plowing that prepares the following year.
Anyhow, is only when there's yoga.
That's another. We'll get to that in unit 3 and 4. We'll get unit 3 and 4. We'll discuss. You said you mixed two things. The question of is there Tosefet Shviit when there's no Mikdash? Is there Tosefet Shviit when there's no Yovel? Is there Shviit when there's no Mikdash but no Yovel? So those are important questions. They'll come up in unit 3 and unit 4. It's a whole mess. But the question is a good question. Just we'll learn later on. But here's the strange thing. I want to have another look at the Rambam, bottom of page 7, and I'll read a bit more slowly. I want to read quickly once to get an idea of what's going on. Let's read a bit more slowly and pay attention to the details. עבודת הארץ בשנה השישית 30 יום סמוך לשביעית אסורה הלכה למשה מסיני. There's הלכה למשה מסיני prohibits doing the working the field 30 days before Shemitah. We're going to skip to the last line. It's the last line and a half over here. Gazru chachamim shelo yu chorshim sdeh hailan erev shviit bezman mikdash ela ad ha'atzeret sdeh lavan ad ha'pesach. So Chazal's gzeira goes back to Shavuot and to Pesach. Why? Because that's the time you plow for the following year. Okay, fair enough. But have a look at the line in the middle. The Rambam writes, why do you have to stop? Why do you have to refrain from working the land from Rosh Chodesh Elul? Because that prepares the 7th year. So you have to stop during the 6th year because it prepares the 7th year. Hold on. But preparing the 7th year starts at Pesach or Shavuot. Now, if the issue is preparing for the 7th year, it should go based on the time at which it would be helpful for the 7th year, regardless of a specific date. See the problem? If you say, look, Shemitah starts a month before Shemitah. Shemitah starts a month before the 7th year. Shemitah doesn't start in the 7th year. Shemitah starts Rosh Chodesh Elul of the 6th year. It'll start in a month and a half. Fine. Right? Shemitah, not Shviit, starts in a month and a half. Shviit will start in 2.5 months. Right? Fair enough. That's fine if you want to define it like that. And then you say, why are you not allowed to plow then? Well, just the same way we do on Shabbos, right? When you add half an hour to Shabbos, you're not allowed to cook at that time. Why not? Because it's Shabbos. Right? You don't need to explain why not. It's Shabbos. So why are you not allowed to plow in the month before Shemitah, before Shviit, before the 7th year? Because it's already Shemitah, even if it's not the 7th year, right? So why is the Rambam saying Shviit? If the definition is preparing for the 7th year, so any preparation for the 7th year should be prohibited. It shouldn't only be limited to plowing in the month before. It should also be plowing 3 months before, planting, all these other things that prepare the 7th. Planting is a whole different story. We'll get to that later on. But it should apply to all these other things as well, right? All the other time frames. Saying it's strange to make a specific time frame that says Rosh Chodesh Elul. Rosh Chodesh Elul is saying that's when Tosefet Shviit starts, implies the other kind of Tosefet, right? That says now it's Shemitah, now it's Shabbos, now it's Shemitah. So why can't you cook now? Because it's Shabbos. Why can't you plow now? Because it's Shemitah, right? But the Rambam does say the reason is Metaknel Shviit. So how does that work? All right, let's have a look at Rav Moshe on page 8. Now, I just want to say this Rav Moshe will answer many other things as well. You remember we said about Tosefet. Tosefet said that Shemitah really starts a month before the 7th year, right? Shemitah really starts a month before the 7th year, and that's why should there be Malkot, I mentioned earlier. Tosefet say, why should there be Malkot on Tosefet Shviit? Because it's Shemitah already. Now, then there's a special limud that says not to. Fine, there's no Malkot. Fine. But why is there Shemitah? Well, why are there Malkot from Rosh Chodesh Elul? I mean, in the Gemara's Havamina, because it's already Shemitah, right? Even if it's not Shviit, it's already Shemitah. Now, if the point is it's Shemitah, so it's not a matter of preparing the following year, right? How does that work? How does that work? So Rav Moshe, I think, gives an excellent explanation of this. What is the relationship? We saw many machlokot that went more in this direction, more in that direction. More in the direction that says we're extending Shemitah beyond the 7th year, or we're saying there's another prohibition of preparing the 7th year. How do we square those two? So Rav Moshe does an excellent job squaring those two. Of course, I'm not one to give, to rate and rank Achronim's Torah, right? If he gives a Torah, so, but katonti. But let's see what he says. Yesh chiluk begeder haisur ben im yalfinan mikrai or me'halacha. De'im me'halacha, halacha lo Moshe Sinai. הווה האיסור על הימים שהתווסף עוד 30 יום לדין שנת השביעית, וגדר האיסור של 30 יום מצד הימים בעצמם, כמו איסור דשנה שביעית, ולא מצד שנכנס החריש לשביעית. אבל אם מקרא היה והאיסור מחמת שהיא בשביל שביעית, מצד הימים בעצמם, היה מותר עד ראש השנה, זה עדיין לא שביעית, רק שאף בשישית אסור חרישת שביעית. So the first point he wants to make is that everything we've been discussing, he wants to say is a מחלוקת רבי ישמעאל ורבי עקיבא. Rabbi Ishmael says, Halacha Moshe Sinai, 30 yom. So that means Shemitah starts 30 days before the 7th year. That's the way Rabbi Ishmael learns it. Rabbi Akiva learns from the pasuk, b'charish v'katzir, charish that prepares the Shemitah. Therefore, the charish that prepares the Shemitah is asur. So it has nothing to do with the time frame. Theoretically, if you can plow during Hanukkah for the 7th year, that should also be asur. And if you can plow on Erev Rosh Hashanah and not prepare the 7th year, that should be fine. Right? The definition should be b'charish, hamoil shviit, tishbot. Right? It's not a matter of the charish stopping charish at specific point in time. So he says, first of all, when we end up saying that it's shloshim yom, that Tosefet Shviit is shloshim yom, it's because we hold like Rabbi Ishmael, not like Rabbi Akiva. If we hold like Rabbi Akiva, we'd say anything that prepares for Shviit should be asur, based on, it should be asur regardless of whether it's 2 days before Rosh Hashanah and does not help Shviit, that should be fine, or Hanukkah and it helps Shemitah, should also be asur. Rabbi Ishmael is the one who talks about the time frame. Okay, that's the first step. לכן, כשהחרישה היא בשביל הפסד הנטיות ולא לצורך שביעית, כמו ב10 נטיות, יש חילוק. דהי מהלכה, אבל לאסור בלמד יום, כמו שאסור בשביעית עצמה. כיוון דעצם הימים אסורים. I'll explain this בעל פה for a moment, because we didn't go very deeply into 10 נטיות, but I'll explain what is he saying. He's saying like this. What is 10 נטיות? 10 נטיות says you're allowed to plow a field in which you have a certain number of saplings, right? Why? Because they're brittle, they'll die if you don't take care of them. Fine. So says Rav Moshe, you're allowed. Says Rav Moshe like this. According to Rabbi Akiva, you don't need the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Why not? Because Rabbi Akiva said you're not allowed to plow. You're not allowed to plow in a way that will help the Shemitah. Question: when I plow the 10 notiyot, am I helping the Shemitah? I'm not. I'm saving the current saplings.
You're also helping them grow in Shemitah.
Right, but that's not my main goal right now. Is to make them to replenish their irrigation system before Shemitah. The current goal is not to prepare for Shemitah. The current goal is just to save these trees now. Therefore, you don't need Al-Chal Hashem Sinai if you're a Rabbi Akiva. If you say the whole definition of the Easter is preparing for Shemitah, you don't need that Al-Chal Hashem Sinai. Why do we need Al-Chal Hashem Sinai? Rabbi Ishmael needs Al-Chal Hashem Sinai because Rabbi Ishmael says the Easter is an Easter of a time frame, 30 days before. You're not allowed to do anything. Say, wait, but it's going to hurt my trees. Say, okay, special Al-Chal Hashem Sinai saying that you are allowed to plow for the sake of the current trees, for the current sake of the trees. So you only need the Al-Chal Hashem Sinai because the definition is a time frame thing and not a preparation definition. Right. So, but the interesting thing is that then Rabbi Ishmael needs the Halacha Hashem Sinai because he learns that the definition of Tosefet Shviit is the time frame that's extended. Mimela, you say, wait, but am I allowed to, in that time frame, am I allowed to plow for things that are current and not for Shemitah? I say, I don't know. According to Rabbi Akiva, of course you can. Why not? According to Rabbi Ishmael, it's a problem. So the answer is you are allowed. So that's the Torah says, fine. We'll matter. There's a pikuach nefesh for the trees. We'll get more to pikuach nefesh of trees in Unit 5. But beseder. Now we still need to define. But this seems to contradict the Rambam because the Rambam does hold like Rabbi Ishmael and says the time frame is 30 days. But still he says so make up your mind. Is the issue l'tekena shviit or is the issue the 30 days? Says Rav Moshe the following in page 8. V'dayu midin tosefet zman, meaning extending Shemitah beyond the boundaries of the 7th year. Mikol makom tzarich davka lezeh she'avoda to'il rak lashvi'it. Mishum da gam b'shvi'it eno isur melacha ela mitam shemo'il lashvi'it. Davya melechet shvi'it shebasadeh. Lachpor ba'alma b'karka mutar b'shvi'it. Am I allowed to dig a well during Shemitah? To dig a well just to gather the rainwater so I can drink it and shower in it? The answer is you are. It says you're not allowed to plow during Shemitah, and plowing on Shabbat, you're not allowed to dig a well on Shabbat. Mitzad Yisr plowing. The answer is the plowing that's usher on the Shemitah is the plowing that will help agriculturally, right? Now, what agriculture exactly? Was anything that you would grow during the 7th year, that's what you're not allowed to to help during Shemitah. So when we say you're not allowed to plow during, just a sec, when you say you're not allowed to plow during Shemitah, what we mean is you're not allowed to plow in such a way that will benefit the 7th year growth. What about if I'm digging a well? That has nothing to do with it, and that's why it's mutar. So says Rav Moshe, 30 days before Shemitah, what are you not allowed to do? Really, what the time frame starts 30 days before. But what is prohibited then? Anything that benefits the 7th year's yivur. The 7th year's the word is skipping me. Produce, thank you. If there's anything that would be produced on the 7th year, that's what you're not allowed to benefit. Meaning, it works like this. The way we learned until now, the way we want to learn Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai was, you're not allowed to do anything that will benefit the 7th year produce. And then you have to say, well, for Pesach, you're already helping the Sdei Lavan, the cornfields, right? Shavuot, you're already helping the trees, so that's Aser. He said, no, that's only Drabanan. Okay, so what's Doraita? Doraita only for Rosh Chodesh Elul. So Rosh Chodesh Elul, it's a time frame thing, right? That's when Shemitah starts. So you shouldn't be allowed to do anything. So not really, because what you're not allowed to do then is the same definition as you have during Shemitah itself, which is benefiting the 7th year produce.
You could, before, but can you build a building? I mean,
so exactly. So building a building, right? So building a building, right? You're digging a hole. You're doing all these things that you're working in the land, right? All those things are mutter because it's not the 7th year produce. And that's the point. The point is, this is how we overcome the kilaim issue we have in the Rambam before. Kilaim, I mean that he's mixing up two seemingly disparate things. On the one hand, the Rambam says starts 30 days before. Afterwards, he says, Drabanan, you're not allowed from whenever it will benefit the produce. And I say, hold on, 30 days before, so that's a point blank issue, right? It's not a matter of benefiting the produce. You're not allowed to do anything. But then the Rambam adds, wait. But I thought it's a time frame thing. On Shabbos, you don't say you're not allowed to do things that will benefit Shabbos, right? Tosefet Shviit. Just have to, it's Shabbos. Half an hour before Shabbos is already Shabbos, right? Tisha b'chodesh be'erev, the 9th of Tishrei, an hour before Tzedek Kochavim is already Tzom Yom Kippur, right? Says Rav Moshe, right, because the time frame is 30 days before. But what are you not allowed to do in that time frame? What you're not to do in that time frame is do anything that will benefit the 7th year. Let's read the next paragraph. Nimtza שאם היה אפשר לעשות בשביעית מלאכה שייך לשישית היה מותר. Let's say I can plow during the 7th year in a way that will benefit the 6th year's produce. Says Rav Moshe, theoretically that should be mutar as well, because there's no difference between digging a well where you're not benefiting the 7th year produce or plowing in a way that will benefit the 6th year's produce. Either way, you're not plowing in a way that benefits the 7th year produce. The מלאכת שישית ודאי אינה שייכת להיחשב מלאכת שביעית והווה כמלאכה בעלמא שמותר. לכן אין שייך לאסור בתוספת שביעית מלאכה מועלת לשישית, כיוון שהיה מותר לעשות זה בשביעית עצמה. לכן רק מלאכה מועילה רק לשביעית, שעושה אותה בשביל שביעית, שייך לאסור גם בתוספת. כיוון שזה מלאכת שביעית האסורה בשביעית, ולא מלאכה שתועיל לשישית. אף שאיסור התוספת הוא תוספת זמן לאסור גם ברגע ההוא. So if I can plow during the 6th year, during Tosefet, if during Tosefet Shviit I do melachot that benefit the 6th year, that's okay. I asked in previous shiurim, if it's a time frame thing, what about ktsira? Am I allowed to reap the 6th year's produce during Tosefet Shviit? Right? I'm allowed to go out and what's it called? Use a combine to gather all of my to harvest. Thank you, the harvester. Right? I want right. I'm allowed to do the harvest during Elul of the 6th year. So you'd say, if it's Tosefet Shviit, it's a time frame thing, right? Meaning, comes Rosh Chodesh Elul, you're not allowed to do anything that you're not allowed to do to work the land anymore, right? Say wrong. You're not allowed to do things that have to do with the 7th year's produce. What about the 6th year's produce? That is mutar. No, we're not saying that. We're saying the Halakha Moshe Sinai says the following. It's a very good question. Let's read one more paragraph. It's a very good question because Dr. Berlowitz is saying, hold on. Rabbi Ishmael says time frame. Rabbi Akiva says benefiting the 7th year produce. So is Rav Moshe mixing the two? He's saying it's a time, Midoraita is a time frame thing, but the definition is Rabbi Akiva's definition. So I think not exactly. Let's see the next paragraph. לרבי ישמעאל שמההלכה נאסר תוספת, אם כן אפשר לומר שהחידוש היה שצריך להוסיף עוד ימים שיהיו קדושים כשביעית, אם כן יעשו גם עבודה שמועילה לימים מהם, כמו שעשו בשביעית, מלאכה של עשור שביעית, וגם ימי התוספת הם כשביעית ממש. לכן צריך ההלכה לחדש יותר נטיות, meaning like this. This is the chachma, he says the brilliant thing. What's the halakha l'Moshe Sinai? Esel netiyot. It's a bit of a weird halakha l'Moshe Sinai in terms of its phraseology. The wording is weird. Because you say, Chalav Sinai, you're allowed to plow. Like, wait, what? I know I'm allowed to plow during the 6th year. So, you're allowed to plow only in specific cases, which implies you're not allowed to plow in other cases. Like, what's the Torah doing here? Why does the Chalav Sinai have to be so like that? The answer is, Shemitah starts a month early. Halakha Moshe Sinai tells me that if it's not benefiting the 7th year produce, it's allowed, even though Shemitah started. That's why the Halakha Moshe Sinai purposely, Rav Moshe said, it's not a mistake. It's not the Torah, the Halakha Moshe Sinai went like this, just because it chose to be complicated. I don't know, right? It skipped the level. Skipped the stage. It said it like that to tell you that also Rabbi Ishmael agrees that they both come together. Meaning there's a time frame issue. On top of the time frame issue, there's a heter for whatever is not for the 7th year produce. Mimela, the Halakha Moshe Sinai, it's implicit in the Halakha Moshe Sinai. That's the definition of what is asur. So now you'll ask, is harvesting mutar during Tosefet Shviit? The answer is harvesting the 7th year produce is asur during Tosefet Shviit. Except in Tosefet Shviit you won't have the 7th year produce, and that's why it's mutar. Now you can ask about Tosefet La'achareh. We'll get to that in the next bit. In the next piece, that's how he squares the two and says the definition is a time frame definition, but what is asur then? The other half of the Chalav Moshe Sinai says what's asur then is only the things that benefit the 7th year's produce. Let's just have a quick look at 2 more paragraphs, and then in page 9 says Rav Moshe lachen kivan she'isur al hazman. This is brilliant. Says Rav Moshe, once again, back to the beginning of the unit. I mentioned a few times, it seems to be that there's no relationship between the limudim in Rosh Hashanah, right? Tosefet Shviit is preparing for the 7th year. Tosefet Shabbat is a point blank isur. So Rav Moshe, no, not exactly. They're both an isur of extending the time frame. They're both an issue of extending the time frame. It is that despite extending the time frame, Shemitah has its special definitions that what's asur during Shemitah itself as well, but also during the Tosefet Shviit is things that benefit the 7th year produce. There's no such distinction during Shabbat and Yom Tov. So, right, it's as the Gemara would say, "Dun mina ve'uki be'atra." Right, you learn from Tosefet Shviit that you extended the time frame, but you define it as the Shabbos and Yom Tov definitions, which are, I don't care why you're doing this. I don't care why. I don't care if the end goal is something for Shabbos, for Sunday, for 3 weeks from now. It doesn't matter. On Shabbos, it's asur point blank. Right? You're not to cook for Shabbos. You're not to cook for after Shabbos or for any other time. As opposed to Shemitah, it just doesn't work like that. And that's why you could learn that you extend the time frame, but you won't necessarily learn all of those implications. I just want to show Rav Shlomo Zalman disagrees with this. Have a last look at page 9.
There's an inherent thing over here that Kedusha Shabbat is time-based, and this is not time-based per se.
Okay.
It's I don't know if it's fair actually to all the time compared to Tosefet Shabbos. It's another thing, but it's in Kedusha Zman, and this we're not talking Kedusha or Zman in Shviit at all.
So I think
it's a different concept.
I tend to agree with you. It's there. Here's the difficult point. Let me try to define that in a second, okay? Because Dr. Berlowitz is saying, hold on, Shabbos starts half an hour early, so it really is Shabbos. Now, Shemitah starts a month early. What does that mean? Kedushas Shemitah now. Your very Halacha Hashem Sinai tells me that it's not really Kedusha of Shemitah. When we learned, I'll strengthen your Kushya more. When we learned the sugyot that have to do with why do we not work during Shemitah, right? So some of them were, so you can go to the Bid Midrash, right? You say this year you're not working, there's no produce this year, it's not yours, we all share, so you're not going to work so hard, so go to the Bid Midrash. If you're busy harvesting during Tosefet Shviit, that's not happening, right? You're very busy, right? You're picking all your apples, right? That's when you pick apples around that time, right? September-ish. That's when apples are picked. So yeah, you're gonna have grapes. The end of the grape season is then as well. It's you're going to be doing a lot of work during that time of Tosefet Shviit. So you can't say it's the same kind of kedusha as Shabbos has, right? It's implicit based on this Rav Moshe. It's implicit in the Halacha Hashem Sinai that it's not a kedushat Shviit as much as it's kedushat Yevul Shviit, kedusha of the produce of the Shviit. That's why you have to prepare it. You have to, right? So I agree that is a problematic point. Rosh Shlomo Zalman didn't like this at all. Let's have a look at him at the bottom of page 9. First of all, he said he disagrees with the idea. Part of what Rav Moshe was saying is that Rabbi Akiva holds charish that prepares for Shemitah Zaser and katsir that of the Shviit produce. Rabbi Shmuel was learning the Halacha Hashem Sinai. Rabbi Akiva doesn't need the Halacha Hashem Sinai, said Rav Moshe. Since Rabbi Akiva by definition is charish that prepares for Shemitah, Mimela, you don't need the Halacha Hashem Sinai to matir either. So Rav Moshe says. Shlomo Zalman says this isn't true. Halacha Hashem Sinai, everyone agrees to Halacha Hashem Sinai. It's just not true. Second point over here, bottom of page 9. יש להדגיש לתוספת של למד יום חלוק מתוספת של פסח ועצרת. שהמבוד אסור לנטוע בזמן הבית אפילו אילן סרק תוך למד יום. גם הקליטה שתהיה לאחר 2 שבתות היא עדיין לפני ראש השנה. אבל גם שנטייה היא לתמיד, מהכלל לצורך שנה שביעית. גם לא דבר שנוהגת בקדושת שביעית. So this kind of answers Dr. Berlowitz's point. Dr. Berlowitz was saying, based on Rav Moshe, you end up saying that really there's no Kedushat Shvi'it in terms of the time. Kedushat Shvi'it is only Kedusha of produce of Shvi'it and preparing the produce and before, and that's fine, but it's not Kedusha in the time. So it's a bit strange to say there's a time frame extension. But Rav Shlomo Zalman says, we see that's not so true. Because according to many Rishonim, you're not allowed to cause the trees to take root during Tosefet Shvi'it. Why not? You see that it's not just the Shvi'it produce, there's no produce. We're talking about trees that don't bear any fruit, right? So we see that there is such a concept. You can't say there's none. And there he agrees. That's why he says the right way to look at it is that it starts a month early for all intents and purposes. So that's all we're going to say for the time being about Tosefet Shvi'it.